All right, and welcome back for our newest week in Psych 3350. So last week you all blogged about happiness. Great responses. I love reading everybody's take on it. And just this idea of, yeah, happiness is cool, but what even is it? And is there a way to be enjoying life beyond happiness? And I saw people saying, is happiness how much money you make? Is happiness that your job is awesome? Is happiness the group of people you surround yourself with? And honestly, I think it's a little bit of everything. Yes, money can open up more free time for us. If I make a lot of money, I can pay people to do the things that I don't want to do, and then I have more time to do the things that I do want to do, and that makes me feel happy. But as I dig into that more, what is it that is making me feel happy, right? The people I'm surrounded by. The fact that I get up every morning and love the job that I do. And so I loved reading all of your posts. Great job. This is going to be our new format. These are going to be longer, so I'm going to post them on YouTube and then hook a link into your announcements. Keep sending me questions. So this week we're talking all about social development. We're going to really be parked on this chapter for the next couple weeks, and I'll just break it down by the different mods. So let's jump in to all about the family. Okay, so as we jump into the family perspective, there are a ton of different types of systems. We can have the parent-child, the child-sibling, the parent-sibling, the parent-parent. And we really need to really understand all of them to understand how families influence development. We also have interdependency, which is like marital relationships impacting sibling relationships, child relationships impacting marital relationships. So we're going to start with parents socializing children. And parents use these different learning principles to teach children social rules. Grades, here's some dessert. You stayed out past curfew, you can't go out this week. And that's our first way that we try and shape behavior. And most importantly is modeling. And that's a parent demonstrating behaviors that they want that child to adopt. And this is stuff that we can do, we're not always aware of it, but trying to be really mindful as a parent that you are modeling a ton of the behaviors that your children are going to display. So let's jump into socialization approaches, and I want to talk about parenting styles. We have authoritarian parenting, which is a very restrictive parenting, a ton of rules. I demand obedience. Why? Because I said so. There's really no discussion. Maybe you had a parent like this, an authoritarian parent. Another type is authoritative. And authoritative parents are controlling, but it's flexible. There's reasonable demands. They're open for a discussion. You know, your curfew is 10 o'clock. An authoritarian parent would say, and that's what it is because, and that's where the conversation would end. An authoritative parent would say, your curfew is 10 o'clock. And you go, what? I want to stay out till later. And they'd say, well, how long were you thinking of staying out till? Say, I wanted to stay out till 11. They say, great, 10:30 sounds like a wonderful compromise. I think you're a little bit older. So authoritative parents, there's a lot more flexibility. They're really focused on facilitating development of autonomy. We have permissive parents, and these parents make very few demands. They rarely try to control behavior, if ever. They are more focused on having a friend in a child than a child. And so these are the parents like, I want to stay out till 2 a.m. And they're like, yeah, sure, if that'll make you happy, sure. I want to stay out till 4 a.m. Okay, yeah. So permissive parents let boundaries not exist. And the final parenting style is the uninvolved parent. Super lax and undemanding. They're really just not involved. I think that word is right there in it. This is a neglectful or an indifferent parent. This parent is more focused on their own needs than their children. Yeah, I should probably stay home because I don't have a babysitter, but I really wanted to go out dancing tonight, and so I'm gonna go out dancing. That's that uninvolved parent. If you're following along in the slides, I have a little box talking about what that looks like versus responsiveness and demandingness. Really, when we look at these parenting styles, authoritative parents, those parents who allow that conversation, who are controlling but flexible, those normally have the best outcomes of their children. Their children grow up to be the most adjusted. Next part of this chapter is parental control. And so we have two types of control. We have behavioral control and psychological control. With behavioral control, as a parent, we're really attempting to regulate conduct through firm discipline. We're putting these strict rules in place and we control behavior. With psychological control, we're really attempting to regulate the conduct by psychological tactics, such as withholding affection, shame and guilt, mind games, things like that. When we use psychological control versus behavioral, often we have low social and emotional competency that comes from that. Really great tactic for parental control, or if you're working with students or your children or maybe even your friends. But a really great thing to do is maintaining control but offering choices. So the example I have in here is it's time to leave the park. I can either carry you or we can walk together. Or I brought 2 snacks and you can pick one. And so this idea is like we've created our boundaries, but we're still allowing our children or our students to move freely within them. Okay, so we're moving on to moms and dads. Your book says that children are really spending more time with their moms than dads at all ages. And what goes on between those two parents differs, with moms often caring and nurturing and often the primary disciplinarian, with dads more of a playmate and a distant disciplinarian. Even though moms tend to be more involved in daily lives, fathers' contributions to development is equally important. Dads who are loving and warm and supportive, often their children are better at emotional and behavioral regulation. They're better at managing their anger and they're less impulsive. And so just being mindful of that, that's an important piece of childhood development. Let's move into co-parenting systems. So we have cooperative, cohesive, and child-centered co-parenting. When you do that, when you work together, even if you as parents aren't together, you get this high degree of family harmony. You have positive traits that come out in your children. And this co-parenting, this can be with if you're not together or even if you are together, just being on the same page is really important. There's also hostile co-parenting. And this is where we're actively competing for the children's attention and loyalty. This turns into aggression later. This is, oh, mom said you couldn't, but I'm going to take you to the monster truck show. Or, just really battling for who the child loving this parent the most. And we also have an imbalanced involvement with children co-parenting style. And this is where we invest different amounts of time and energy into parenting. And this can result in one parent like gatekeeping or limiting the other parent's involvement. When we do this, our children can develop into being very anxious. Let's talk about sibling relationships. Parents are less attentive to older siblings. Older siblings become less compliant. This can lead to a negative sibling relationship, and they could resent that new baby. So what happens is we have a child, they get all of our attention, then we have another child, and now that they're the baby, they're getting more attention. And if we begin to neglect that older child, it can really affect the entire family. As you're moving through this chapter, just think about, if you have siblings, how the birth of different siblings affected your parents' relationship. Often with the birth of a first child, we do see a drop in marital satisfaction, but level of marital support plays a role in how much of a drop. So if one parent is in charge of doing everything, we see this huge drop. The more that they co-parent and work together, we don't see as big of a drop. Often there is additional drops with subsequent births, but kids make us really happy families, right? All right, so another big part of this chapter is interparental conflict, right? Parents fighting. And so some exposure is very important for children developing because we're learning how to constructively solve a conflict. Wow, I saw that mom was really upset with her partner and she took some deep breaths and they talked and they didn't raise their voice. That must be how you solve a problem. So some interparental conflict is important. If children never see that, they have unrealistic expectations developed of interpersonal conflict. So at the first sign of a fight with one of their friends, they're gonna be like, what? I've never seen this. I don't know how to do it. This person must hate me. So we do want to do some exposure to some of that conflict. However, if it's emotionally or physically intense, if it's unresolved, if it involves issues about that particular child, those things can be pretty harmful. If we're exposed to frequent harmful conflict like that, a variety of things can happen, from behavioral problems to emotional regulation challenges to even social cognitive outcomes like a conduct disorder, aggression, anxiety, very negative stuff. So let's move on to divorce. And that is the topic for your blog this week. So I'm really interested to see how you respond to that. Short and long-term effects of divorce. There's anxiety, there's depression, there's anger, low self-esteem. There's a lot of stressors that come with divorce, as well as changes. There's financial changes, there's where you're living changes, there's responsibility changes. And so just being very mindful of, if you are to get divorced, what that can do psychologically to both you as the parent and to the child, and just being mindful of having those conversations. You know, your book talks about some trends in different parents during divorce. And so often we see moms possibly become more impatient, maybe a little more hostile, and we see dads become a little less mature. And I have in here like a Disneyland dad, like just, we're going to do fun stuff so that you love me and you love spending time here. And so we really want to be aware that we're not falling into some of those trends. Depending on the age of divorce, different things can happen. In infancy, it really disrupts attachment. In early childhood, kids are lacking the cognitive abilities to understand causes and consequences of divorce. A lot of students I work with are often saying, like, it's my fault my parents got divorced. You know, from their thought process, egocentrically, that's where they're at. They think everything is their fault or everything revolves around them. But they really don't have the cognitive abilities to understand, no, there were other things going on that led to that divorce. And in middle childhood, kids are a little bit more equipped to understand their parents' relationship separate from them, but they can have fears of abandonment, sadness, and shock. Also, if you're getting divorced while your child is an adolescent, they are really understanding the nuances of divorce. They're getting it. Mom and dad just aren't getting along. That's why their relationship is ending. Often we'll see them withdraw from family and possibly move towards some undesirable peer activities. There is a little bit of evidence that there's longer lasting effects, and that's because we're really trying to form our identity during this time, and so that's been disrupted from the divorce. We are seeing that joint custody works the best when conflict between parents is really small and children aren't feeling caught in the middle. Healthy co-parenting. Next part of this chapter really starts to break down diversity. So SES, or socioeconomic status. Think about what low-income parents, what struggles they have compared to a high-income family, and just how that can play out in our parenting. You know, there's a couple slides in here just talking about likely styles of lower SES families, and I just want you to dig a little deeper, like, why do you think that would be the style that we're seeing more often? Why are we needing to be more controlling when our resources are lacking? There's a section in here on children who are adopted. The majority extremely well adjusted, but there are cases of more emotional, behavioral, and learning problems than people's just biological children. Last two parts of this diversity chapter are same-sex parents, and children tend to be as well adjusted as children of heterosexual parents. And just think it's important to know that your sexual orientation doesn't dictate how you parent. All right, I think that's all I'm going to do for this chapter. Your blog this week is all about staying together or getting divorced. And so I'm really interested. I think one person has commented so far, but I'm really interested to see your thoughts. You know, maybe you were a product of parents who stayed together and got divorced when you were older. I'm wondering how that affected you. Or maybe your parents got divorced and it was the best thing, or they got divorced and it was terrible. So really interested to see what you all say. For me personally, my parents got divorced when I was about 8, and the opportunities that came from them not being together anymore were tremendous for my growth. And so I'm happy to blog with you in there and tell you my thoughts on it, but I really want to see what you all have to say. And that's all we're going to do this week. So have a wonderful week. Can't wait to read your blogs, and I will see you next week. Bye.